What's up, everyone? Tera Roberts here with FantasyPros, giving you 10 matchups to avoid in Week 13. Before I get into the list, if you want a chance to win a signed Jonathan Taylor Indianapolis Colts jersey courtesy of bettingpros.com, your place to start betting smarter and not harder, you need to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now. Comment below on this video, and that's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Now let's go ahead and dive right in. First up, Baker Mayfield. This is a rough week for streaming options at quarterback, with 6 teams on a bye and multiple quarterbacks that you just can't use, like Tim Boyle and Desmond Ridder, and whoever is starting on teams like New England and Cleveland. The pickings are slim. It's difficult to turn your nose up at any quarterback that has shown production, but when it comes to Baker Mayfield, you need to avoid this matchup and pivot to another option. Carolina's defense is an absolute no-go through the air. Even Dak Prescott could only muster up 16 fantasy points against Carolina. Even CJ Stroud threw for a paltry 140 yards against Carolina. And Carolina has done this without 2 of its top players in its secondary on IR, with JC Horn and Jeremy Chin, and with CJ Henderson dealing with an injury as well. Baker has been a fine streaming option overall, and while he doesn't have a massive ceiling in good matchups, he's getting you a solid 17 to 20 fantasy points. It's not so hard to get to that level when you're throwing the ball to guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, but all the talent in the world is not going to save him in this matchup. Next up, Drake London. This is a matchup that is going to feature a lot of Drake London versus Sauce Gardner, and as talented as London is, this is not the matchup that I would want to attack when his quarterback is Desmond Ridder. The Jets have allowed the 5th least receiving yards in the league and boast one of the league's top tandem corners in Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed. There's just no room to breathe in this Jets secondary, and Drake London will likely struggle. I know you're thinking, but Tara, we just saw both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle have strong games against the Jets. Yeah, they have Tua Tagovailoa throwing to them. I have zero faith in Desmond Ridder. London is wide receiver 41 on the season, but he's shown some upside with Ridder in good matchups. This is not one of those scenarios. You need to avoid this matchup. Let's keep things on the Falcons-Jets game here and talk about Garrett Wilson. In this matchup, you have matchups of wildly talented receivers being held back by terrible quarterback play. We talked about Desmond Ridder, but Tim Boyle's lack of capabilities are honestly on another level. And Atlanta's secondary is no slouch with AJ Terrell, Jeff Okudah, and Jesse Bates. Jesse Bates actually had a very impressive pick 6 last week against New Orleans, and interceptions should be flowing for Atlanta when turnover machine Tim Boyle is at the helm. Wilson actually had a good game last week. He caught 7 of his 10 targets for 44 yards and a touchdown. It's not difficult for Wilson to see volume because he is the only option. The only other viable pass catchers are Breece Hall and Tyler Conklin. But the problem in this matchup and why volume is potentially a risk here is that, unlike Miami, Atlanta is going to struggle to move the ball on the Jets defense. This game has had the lowest point total of the week, and the game will just move slower. Tim Boyle will not throw for the same volume that he did in Week 12, and both teams will rely on their run game. Next up, A.J. Dillon. Technically speaking, Kansas City isn't actually a terrible matchup for opposing running backs. Kansas City's defense has been excellent overall this season, but top running backs have had strong performances against them, and that's not shocking because they've played some great backs. Josh Jacobs, DeAndre Swift, and Raheem Mostert to name a few, but A.J. Dillon does not qualify for that category. His average on the season is 3.4 yards per carry with just 1 touchdown. The most yards and best performance Dillon had this season was in Week 5 against Las Vegas, a game where he was the lead back with Aaron Jones injured. The result was 20 carries for 76 yards and 1 touchdown, no receptions, for 13.6 fantasy points. It's tough to imagine that he will thrive in this matchup, a matchup where points could be difficult to come by with an over-under of just 42.5 and the Chiefs a 6-point favorite. Let's talk about another Packers player here, Christian Watson. Shutting down top receivers has been a very clear trend with Kansas City in 2023. Davante Adams, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, all held below 13 fantasy points since week 7. Now, what you could debate is whether Christian Watson is the top receiver in Green Bay, and technically speaking, no, he's not. But from the way that a defense approaches their receiving core, it's Christian Watson that would receive the top coverage. Especially coming off of his best performance of 20 fantasy points, finally showcasing wide receiver 1 upside. We want to trust Christian Watson again after back-to-back weeks with touchdowns, but this just isn't a good matchup. Next up, Joe Mixon. I was skeptical of the Jags defense coming into the season, and we're 12 weeks deep, and their run defense has been one of the best in the league. They've allowed less than 1,000 rushing yards on the season and just 7 rushing touchdowns, but that's just looking at the overall statistics. If you isolate it exclusively to running backs, only 2 running backs have scored rushing touchdowns on the Jags this season. 2, Dameon Pierce and Zach Moss. The last rushing touchdown by a running back was back in week 6. And this isn't the result of playing poor running backs. Oh no, they have played Derrick Henry, who they held to 38 rushing yards. Christian McCaffrey didn't score a touchdown against them. Christian McCaffrey! This is a terrible matchup, and this is coming off of Mixon's first game with Jake Browning at quarterback, and the result was 8 carries for 16 yards. This is an absolute no-go. The only way he can succeed is through receptions, but we can't count on that with Browning. Tyler Higbee is coming off his best performance of the season, catching all 5 of his targets for just 29 yards, but he had 2 touchdowns. Do not get lulled into thinking Tyler Higbee is a streaming option. This week, the Rams play the Browns, and the Browns defense is great at defending literally any position. Mark Andrews is the only tight end to have success against the Browns. Outside of Mark Andrews, the highest yardage total of a tight end against the Browns this season was Noah Fant with 32 yards. The most receptions any other tight end has had against the Browns is 3. The only other tight end to score on the Browns was Adam Troutman last week. This matchup is set up to be a complete bust week for Tyler Higbee. Go with literally any other option. Next up, Cooper Kupp. Staying with the Rams, I hate to say this, but this is a terrible matchup for Cooper Kupp. Again, the Browns just flat out don't give up good games. I'm not saying there's no way Cooper Kupp can thrive here. It's not a steadfast panic button to the extent that it is with Tyler Higbee, because there are some anomalies here at receiver against the Browns. George Pickens had an excellent game against the Browns earlier in the season. Seattle's receivers had good games against them, and the Colts absolutely went off against the Browns. So Cooper Kupp could go off if we're going to get the old Cooper Kupp. Unfortunately, Cooper Kupp has failed to reach double-digit fantasy points in a game since week 6. And while Puka Nacua has been inconsistent, he has been better. But the big issue here is that despite Nacua being better, Kupp will undoubtedly face the tougher coverage in this matchup. Avoid Cooper Kupp. Now, I am fully aware that some of you play in leagues where you cannot afford to sit a guy like Javante Williams. I mean, I get it. I'm starting Kenneth Gainwell on a hope and a prayer in one league. So yes, I totally get it. But if you have someone else in a good matchup and can afford to sit Williams, I would sit him. There's been some strong performances by several running backs against Houston, but it's not the layup matchup that it's been in the past. And the big problem here is that Houston has become an offensive powerhouse. If CJ Stroud jumps out early on Denver, and Denver isn't playing from a positive position, this could mean more involvement from Samaje Perine. We could see the ground game limited in this matchup, and Williams thrives off of volume. If Williams gets less than 15 carries, he gets less than 10 fantasy points. The correlation is very clear. And finally, Terry McLaurin. Your instincts might be telling you to feel confident in Terry McLaurin because there is zero chance that Washington's defense can stop Miami, so Sam Howell is going to throw for volume, and McLaurin will thrive. Part of that is true. Howell is probably going to throw for volume here, but that doesn't necessarily benefit McLaurin in general or in this particular matchup. Top receivers going against Miami haven't had high volume games recently, and a big part of that is the return of Jalen Ramsey. Volume has been low and receivers have gotten their points via touchdowns, But that is bad news for Terry McLaurin. McLaurin has 2 touchdowns on the year, and it is very unlikely that he has a strong game without volume. It doesn't help that the last time McLaurin had double-digit fantasy points was in Week 9. This could be the 4th straight game with under 10 fantasy points. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And remember, if you want a chance to win a signed Jonathan Taylor Indianapolis Colts jersey courtesy of bettingpros.com, your place to start betting smarter and not harder, you need to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now. Comment below on this video and that's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize.